How many people here can say they've gotten a cow pregnant? Raise your hand. Two of us. All right. Right on. Right on. Well, now I've got your attention. Thank you, Joe. You weren't willing? Oh, I understand. Well, I determined as I prepared this speech that I would deliver it in the format of one of my favorite authors, Bill Bryson. That when you read his books, you're very entertained and you learn something. So that's my goal for you tonight, is that you'll learn something and you'll be well entertained. I was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, just outside the city limits, and everyone I knew worked for Oldsmobile back in the day. My father, my brother, my brother-in-law, everybody worked for Oldsmobile. There were 3 different plants within a mile and a half of my home. And as we got to high school age, I wasn't really looking forward to going working on the assembly line. You earned real good money back in the day, but it was not something I looked forward to. Well, a buddy of mine had a sister who had a farm about 30 miles outside of town. And so I was very anxious to go there and work on the farm while we were in high school. We'd bale hay, we'd pitch manure, we'd milk cows. Whatever it took was what we did. And it was a small family farm. We were milking 12 to 18 head at any given point in time. Well, one of the things I'd like to teach you tonight, although many of you probably came from the mainland, you might know some of these things, but if you didn't, here's your chance. Well, you've all seen pictures of the barns. They're all over the place in the mainland, the big, beautiful red barns. And next to the barn, there's a round hunk of concrete known as a silo. And the silo is used for putting silage, and that's where you take an entire plant, chop the heck out of it, and pitch it in there. And rather than rotting, it ferments and turns into silage. And that silage will stay warm and not frozen for into the winter time. The freezing temperature goes lower than 32 degrees. Of course, in Michigan, freezing temperature goes below whatever freezing temperature for silage is, so you're in there with a pickaxe getting it loose. But nonetheless, that's a silo, and what's in it is silage. Another thing I learned is that tractors have water in the tires, and that gives a lot more girth to the tractor and better traction. And because the water is on the axis of the axle, it's not that hard for the tractor to push it. So it's a very effective way of giving it a lot more oomph, because the motors on tractors just don't want to stop for any reason. Well, another thing, and this is something you can probably use in the office, the term no bull comes from dairy farms. On a dairy farm, the cows are your source of income. And if you introduce a bull to the equation, while you do get the calves you desire, you introduce a potential for injury. And that's something you don't want, because that will affect you in the pocketbook. So most small dairy farms use artificial insemination as their means of calves and lactation. Well, that in itself is a story that I'll just give you a little bit. It's very interesting how it's done, because the veterinarian comes in and the glove for their left arm goes all the way up to their armpit. It goes in the top hole. And in their right hand, they have a long, slender stainless steel tube. And at the end of that tube, there's a little squishy thing that pushes the semen out the other end of the tube. And that's how the cow's impregnated. So what happens is they're reaching in there and they're feeling about for all the right bits. And the tube goes in and they're guiding it to just the right place. And they say, Bruce, come over, push the plunger. And I went and pushed the plunger. And I consider that my calf. You know, we're not genetically related. I never adopted it. But that was my calf. And at 17, I was very intrigued at the whole scenario and somewhat embarrassed, because you buy cow semen out of a catalog, and it's, you know, it's not like a Sears or Roebuck catalog, but it was different pages, and there was pictures of the bull and how much he weighed and what kind of animal he was and where he went to college, all that kind of stuff. And the semen was between $5 and $45 a shot, and that just kind of amazed me. I'm glad you're enjoying this, or your beer. Well, fast forward 25 years, and I've become a woodworker, and I've got a lot of tools and wood and fasteners and abrasives and blades. And so when I moved here, I kind of accidentally brought 2 intermodal containers. And the first one I loaded while I was still there, and I bought a little fork truck on eBay for $846, and it did a fine job of moving stuff into the first container, and it was packed tight, and the little fork truck was in there. And my plan was, when the time came, I'd go back and I'd take all the lumber that was stored in an off place where I'd rented space for my shop and move it into the container and whatever else. But in the intervening time, I bought land in Hamakua, which kind of like land everywhere on the islands is not favorable to a fork truck with small tires. So I decided I would buy a tractor. Well, I got farm background, this is no problem. Except for finding a tractor. Before I left to go back to the old country, I was hitting the Farmers Exchange, Craigslist, the Equipment Trader. I could not find a tractor to save my life. And I'd gone back, I'd been there several days and was just like giving up on the idea of finding a tractor. And my daughter had me running an errand out to Miami University. So I'd left Cincinnati and I'm driving out there. And, it occurred to me, the country roads in the mainland are kind of like the ring road here, except that in the mainland you can see all the houses every quarter mile or whatever. You don't see anything on the ring road here. But I was driving this country highway. And I came to a stop sign, and on the far side of that stop sign, on the right-hand side, there was a barn, and there was a silo. It was probably full of silage, maybe not. But on the road in front of that barn, lined up like little beautiful toy soldiers, were these tractors. They were red, and they're shiny, and they were new, but they were like lawn and garden tractors, small kind of stuff. But at the far end of that row of tractors, it was this big green John Deere tractor that had a loader on it. So I... and... started talking to the guy that ran it was a farmer that had decided he'd rather sell tractors than work the field anymore. So we'd start talking pretty serious, and he asked me if I wanted a scraper with it, and I had asked him what that did, and he explained it, and I said, yeah, sure, okay. My thought was I'd buy this tractor, I'd use it for loading the container, I'd use it for unloading the container, and since I'd brought it to Hawaii, it'd be worth enough money, I'd at least get my cash back out of it. So we start getting to the fine numbers, and I said, okay, well, one thing here, the tires on this tractor look like they're very expensive, and I'm taking this tractor to Hawaii. I'd like you to put new tires on it and just bake that right into the price that we agree on. So he's making notes and stuff, and he knows what all this stuff costs, so we keep talking, and we get down to fine points, and I'm pulling out my checkbook to write him a deposit. He says, oh, hey, do you want the tires filled with cow semen? It was a beautiful summer day. The sky was blue, the big puffy clouds, and my mind's racing. I got to answer this guy, but and I'm thinking about the people that are passing us on this highway, and I'm thinking, they're looking at us, they're talking. What would they think if they knew he just asked me if I wanted my tires filled with cow semen? And so, yeah, sure, yeah, fill them up to the top. What the hell, I don't know. So, then I got to thinking, there must be 80 gallons in those tires, and if it's $5 to $45 for one shot, what would that cost to fill those tires? But he's paying for it. Okay, that's fine. So several days later. Well, the other thing I was thinking, Mike Rowe, that TV show Dirty Jobs? I'm thinking, who is it that has... Anyway, several days later, he brings the tractor as part of the agreement. He brought it to my shop, and he's unloading it, and he's, oh, yeah, we got this done, and that's new, and you got your tires put on, they're filled with calcium. And calcium chloride is put in the water to make it heavier. He'd said calcium the whole time. So I hope you've learned something that will help you in your agricultural purchases. Thank you for your time and attention.